we all know that several UK fighters have signed to Al Haymon over the past few months, and many of them from Eddie Hearn's Matchroom stable. And in previous videos about this topic, I speculated on the possibility of PBC arriving in the UK, where Al Haymon would buy airtime off terrestrial UK television stations, just the same way as he's done in America. I see that as possibly the long-term goal of Al Haymon. If PBC works in America and it's profitable, if he makes his money back and makes a good return on his investment, then why wouldn't he expand out to other territories? And with him signing all these UK fighters, do you think that he doesn't know that these particular fighters are going to be more profitable in their home country? Of course he knows. But will PBC happen in the UK? Because it would have a massive negative impact on the other promoters in the UK, Frank Warren particularly, and I mean all of them really, but even the major guys like Frank Warren and Eddie Hearn. Well, Eddie Hearn has come out in an interview, which I'll leave a link to in the description below, and he's given credibility to this speculation of mine that PBC will end up in the UK. And in this interview, he says, yep, he can see PBC happening in the UK, PBC shows happening. And he says, hopefully, or probably with us, meaning probably with Matchroom. And he better hope that. He better hope, because if it's with a different promoter than Matchroom, then Matchroom and Sky are going to take a serious hit in the pocket. And they're probably going to see a lot of their fighters defect to PBC Al Haymon, the same way that Golden Boy saw a lot of fighters defect to PBC and Al Haymon. So Eddie Hearn better hope that it's in conjunction with him. But there's one particular reason why it may not have anything to do with Eddie Hearn if PBC ends up in the UK. Because in America, they have something called the Muhammad Ali Act, which is a federal act which is supposed to help regulate boxing and clear up corruption. And one of the things that is prohibited under the Muhammad Ali Act is for a promoter to also act as a manager of a fighter. And to get around this Muhammad Ali Act, Al Haymon basically has other promoters, allegedly, right? I have to say that. I don't want to get sued by anyone. He allegedly has other promoters like Warrior Boxing and Lou DiBella and people like that promote the shows for him on his behalf, because he's not officially supposed to be a promoter. But he has these guys promote the shows for him, but he bankrolls it. He funds it all. So he's really the promoter behind the scenes, but just to get around the red tape, he wheels out these other promoters, funds it all, and has them promote it officially. Now, in the UK, there is no Muhammad Ali Act. So in the UK, promoters can also be the fighter's manager. And Frank Warren is someone who does that quite regularly. Yeah, he is Derek Chisora's promoter and manager. All right, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe he is. So this is something that goes on in the UK regularly. There is no Muhammad Ali Act. So therefore, if Al Haymon expands out of America with his PBC model to the UK, there's no reason that he would need Eddie Hearn necessarily. He'd be able to promote his own shows in the UK. Again, I don't know the ins and outs of, because Al Haymon's obviously an American citizen, would he be still at risk of violating the Muhammad Ali Act if he's acting as manager and promoter, or acting as a promoter in the UK when he's an American citizen? I don't know how the ins and outs of that would actually work, but assuming that he is allowed to act in the UK outside of the Muhammad Ali Act, then yeah, he would have no need for Eddie Hearn and Eddie Hearn's services or his help. He'd just be able to set up whatever Al Haymon promotions and do his thing, although that might bring more heat on him in the US. So we'll see how that goes. But as I said, in this article, Eddie Hearn has resigned himself to the possibility, the very real possibility, that PBC will end up in the UK. And it all depends, though, on the success of PBC in the US financially, because it's a big risk, the PBC model, where he's buying airtime off all these different television networks and hoping to make his money back and make a profit from advertising. So he's really got to hope these fights are watched by many, hope they attract a viewing audience and whatnot. I personally think that the PBC model would actually work better in the UK than it does in the US. In the UK, as you've seen with Carl Froch, George Groves, as you're seeing right now with Anthony Joshua, Dylan White, they're able to get a tremendous amount of interest, great ticket sales for domestic level fights. I know Froch Groves wasn't really domestic level, but it was a domestic fight. Joshua White is domestic level. And this is going to sell out a big arena. And it's probably going to be pay-per-view for a domestic level fight. That just don't happen in the US. So to be able to get, and that's on a satellite television station. That's not even on terrestrial TV. That's something, that's a subscription service. People have to subscribe to Sky Sports, and then they're going to have to pay for box office or whatever to see Joshua White. Okay. But it's massive already, sold out a big arena, and probably going to be pay-per-view, and it's got the country all talking about it. So imagine if that fight was happening on ITV, on one of the terrestrial channels, or BBC or Channel 5. Can you imagine how big that would be then? It would be even bigger than it is at the moment. So with PBC in the UK, I think it would be a bigger success than it is in America. Honestly, I think it would be huge in the UK. And if Al Heyman is a smart man, which I know he is, it's a rhetorical, speculation really, but he must know the potential that there is in the UK. That it's an absolute gold mine. Question is, will he need Eddie Hearn or not? Eddie Hearn better hope so, or else Al Heyman's going to destroy. Eddie Hearn previously had said he can't really see Al Heyman ending up in the UK. He can't see it. He can't see Al Heyman impinging on Hearn's territory and snatching fighters away from him. But now it seems like the inevitable has finally dawned on Eddie Hearn, the reality of it. That actually Al Heyman, this is business, and he don't care about no friendship or, pally meetings he's had with Eddie Hearn. If he can start taking money out of the UK market, he's going to do it. And that's the end of it. So Eddie Hearn, I don't know, he must be secretly hoping that either Al Heyman brings him in. And how is that going to affect Eddie Hearn's relationship with Sky? I'm not sure if I already mentioned that in this video. But if PBC arrives in the UK, then you're going to have championship level fights on free-to-air television. Why are then people going to watch boxing on Sky? And if Eddie Hearn is helping promote those fights on terrestrial television, Sky not going to like that. So, I don't know, it's a complicated situation, and it must be one that is worrying Eddie Hearn. And I'm telling you, he must be secretly hoping that PBC fails in America now. Because it could have ramifications for his own business. Negative ramifications on his own business. So, I don't know. Interesting article, people. Have a read of it for yourselves and let me know your take on it. As I say, I personally think that the PBC model will work better in the UK than it does in America. Yep. Because like I say, look at even domestic level fights in the UK, and they're on satellite or cable, and they still do great numbers with the right fighters anyway. And you put that on terrestrial television, you're going to have crazy numbers. You're talking about millions. I mean, back in the 90s, when people like Prince Nassim, Nigel Benn and Chris Eubank were on terrestrial television, Frank Bruno, you had incredible numbers. When Nigel Benn fought Gerald McClellan, and remember, Gerald McClellan wasn't a big name in the UK. The papers were talking him up as a killer and a mini Mike Tyson and all this kind of stuff. Not that he was stylistically like Tyson, but just his aura and punching power and the way he was walking through people. That's how the newspapers were talking up Gerald McClellan in the UK. But to the general public, they didn't really know who he was. They just heard that he was this big bad American that was coming up to bash up their beloved Nigel. Okay, so Nigel and him being in danger is what sold the fight. There wasn't really two UK stars that sold that fight. And that fight still did over 17 million viewers on ITV. Back when that fight happened in, when was it, 95 or something like that, 95, 96. 17 million. Right? That is the kind of potential that you've got for fights in the UK that are shown on terrestrial television, championship fights, particularly if you can get a star like a Nigel Benn, who, as he was at the time, then wow, you've got potential to do absolutely incredible figures. So yeah, like I say, people, drop your comments below. Let me know how you feel and let me know your opinions on this. All right, I'm out.